Okay, so there's two quite sizable exam papers that students have to tackle for English. They get two separate qualifications, one for English language and one for English literature. For English language, the exam papers are very similar in format. There's a paper one, which is an hour and 45 minutes, and a paper two. The main difference between these two papers really is that the first one, they will always have to read an unseen aspect of fiction, normally the start of a novel or an extract from within the novel. And then paper two, they're given two non-fiction pieces to read, and they can be biographies, they can be travel writing sometimes, or they could be diary entries. And one of those tends to be from the 1800s, so it's quite a challenging thing for them to read. The exam then is split into two sections for each. They are asked 4 questions on the fiction extract. They're also asked 4 questions on the non-fiction extract in paper 2, and that amounts to 40 marks for each paper. And then the second half of the paper is basing the examiners judging the quality of their writing. So for paper 1, they're asked to write either at the start of a short story, and they're often given a title like write about a day where something went terribly wrong, or sometimes it can be an image, and often it is an image, and say describe this picture. So for paper 1, they'll either have to do some descriptive writing or story writing, and in paper 2 it's non-fiction. So we have been told by the exam board this year that all students will be asked to write an article on a topic. So we don't know what the topic will be. It's normally linked to their reading. So if they're reading 2 pieces of non-fiction writing about schools, they might have to write an article about school. But they will be writing a newspaper article style piece for their writing assessment. And that's one of the things the exam board have told us this year, just to kind of compensate for the fact that we've had lots of COVID lockdowns. And then they add the 2 papers up to 2 marks up together to give a score of 160. And then they allocate grade boundaries alongside that to decide where the pass is. Roughly speaking though, the pass mark has normally been around about half marks in each paper, but we're yet to see where they are this year. For English literature, there's a big cross there on next to paper 1, 19th century novel. And again, this is as a result of COVID. Our students have had one of the texts that they'd normally have to be tested on removed this year. So the 2 papers are as follows. For paper 1, their first literature text, they're going to be writing about an anthology of poetry. There's 15 poems that they've studied in school, and they'll be expected to know those poems really well. And then their task is to compare 2 of those poems. In the exam, we don't know which poems they're going to be asked to compare. They normally name one, so they'll say something like, compare the way that war is presented in the poem Bayonet Charge with a poem of your choice. But the poem of their choice, interestingly, will have to be from memory. And they're going to have to have remembered quotations and remember the other 14 poems. Just 2 or 3 central quotations, the big ideas in the poem, some of the context, so that they're able to compare the poem that's in the exam paper with one from their memory. The second part of that first paper is the text Inspector Calls, which is a modern prose drama. It's something that they've studied and have revised several times. And each one of those questions in paper 1, roughly speaking, is about 45 minutes in length, where they'd be expected to write essays, where they have an introduction, they explore a few big ideas about these poems or the text, and then come to some kind of conclusion in the end. For paper 2, which is compulsory paper, they are going to have to, again, it's 2 essays that they're going to be writing. First one is on Shakespeare, so all of our students have either studied Romeo and Juliet or Macbeth, so they will be doing an essay on Romeo and Juliet or Macbeth. Again, we don't know what the question is, but it tends to be either around a character or a theme that they will have studied in school. After that, they are given an unseen poem that they have to deal with in the exam. Normally the poem is quite accessible, and the question is something along the lines of how is the theme of weather presented in this unseen poem. So they read the poem and they work out what the writer is trying to say about how weather might be presented, or war, or suffering, or childhood, whatever topic it is. And then finally, they're given 1 extra unseen poem, and the question at the end there is only worth 8 marks, which is compare the similarities and differences in the methods that the writers have used in these two poems. So essentially for English literature, they'd be expected to know 3 of our exam texts really, really well, and then also have to deal with an unseen poem that is put in front of them just on the exam day. It's worth mentioning that all students, by the time they've done their exams, will have also had a speaking exam, which is something that is assessed in school by an external examiner, and there's been information sent home about that, and they get a separate qualification for their English exam. In terms of what students must do to revise for the exams, it's really important that they understand how they're going to be marked for these papers. They have to organise their notes. They've got yellow books at school, and a lot of students nearly at this late stage start doing mind maps and spider diagrams of the key text with the characters and the theme. There's nothing wrong with reading, watching or listening to the set text again. The more exposure they have to those stories, the better really. A lot of students listen to, there's free versions of the text on podcasts that they can listen to, and obviously there's televised versions of Macbeth and Romeo and Juliet that they can access through a lot of streaming platforms. Most important though really is they're going to have to start to memorise key quotations from the set text. As I said before, the poetry that they have to study, they're not going to have it in front of them. They're not going to have Romeo and Juliet or Macbeth in front of them. They need to remember some key quotations, and they can get you a long way through that exam if you've got a bank of 5 or 6 quotations that are really important from each text, so that you can go into the exam knowing that you're coming in with some quotations that you can analyse and link to the question that's set. We always recommend revision cards so that they can self-test. So on the back of the card they would have a character like Mrs. Burling, and on the other side of the card they would have 5 or 6 things they want to remember, which might include a quotation, and then they can test themselves by saying, okay, what do I remember about Mrs. Burling? And they flip the card over and see if they've remembered all the details that they wanted there. So revision cards are a really good way to check that they've actually put things into their memory that they're going to need for the exam. We've given students knowledge organisers, which are basic questions about the text, and again it's a case of covering the right hand side and asking themselves who is Sheila Burling, and then they can check the answers just so that they've got the basics. And of course some students have purchased revision guides, and the CGP guides and other revision guides are really, really great for just spending a little bit of time revisiting the poetry or different characters from their texts. In terms of what students could do beyond this, I mean, we're luckily in the internet age, we have got hundreds and thousands of revision videos for GCSE set texts, and people like Mr. Brough is worth looking at YouTube, who talks about not only the literature text but how to apply, make sure you're hitting the mark scheme in language. GCSE Bite Size from BBC also contains key information, but really what it comes down to is once students have got all of their study notes together, got all their revision cards and got their mind maps for the set text sorted out, really the best way for them to practice is to just put themselves through that, what it's actually going to be like on the day, which means past essay questions or past examination papers. Teachers are very, very happy to distribute as many of these as we want to students, and the good thing about doing this at this stage is that when they hand in that work, the teacher can give them personal feedback about which questions they're struggling with or which skills they might need to work on. And obviously that kind of personal feedback that students can receive can really make the difference, because it can identify the gaps or the errors that they need to try to fix. In terms of offering additional help and support, the first port of call obviously is their subject teacher, who will give them all the guidance and all the support and all the additional resources, and has got all the links to past papers and study materials that they can distribute. However, if they do want to do additional work after school, we have Study Plus running every Tuesday to Thursday, and we have English teachers down there to support students with their revision. And for a more specific English support, every Wednesday after school in E11 is something that we call Core Offer, where we are working with students on exam paper skills for the English language papers. At the minute we're looking at how to do the descriptive and story writing questions perfectly. So this is where students can go. If they are interested to go into Core Offer, have a word with their English teachers and we can add them to our lists. Other than that, they were welcome to Study Plus anytime. If you have any questions or do feel the need to contact me about anything, my name is Mr. McNaughton. You can find my email on the school website, and do send me an email if there's anything else that you think I can do to help your child with their exam preparations. Thanks for listening.